The emergency room doors swung open with a violent crash. Sarah Mitchell didn't flinch. She'd heard worse, seen worse, been through worse, but nobody in St. Augustine General Hospital knew that. To them, she was just another nurse, quiet, efficient. The woman in light blue scrubs who always took the night shift, who never complained, who kept her head down and did her job. She had kind eyes and gentle hands. She spoke softly to frightened patients. She cleaned up messes without being asked. That's all they saw. They didn't see the scars hidden beneath those scrubs. They didn't know about the years she'd spent underwater in the blackest depths of the ocean, carrying 80 pounds of gear through currents that could rip a man apart. They didn't know about the missions she'd completed in places whose names were still classified. And they certainly didn't see the small gold pin she wore on a chain around her neck, tucked carefully beneath her scrub top where no one would notice. The combat diver pin. Only a handful of women in the entire United States military had ever earned it. Sarah Mitchell was one of them, but she wore it hidden, always hidden, because she'd learned the hard way that some truths were better kept quiet. Tonight that was about to change. Nurse. Nurse. The voice belonged to Dr. Bradley Hoffman, a cardiac surgeon who'd been at St. Augustine's for 15 years and never let anyone forget it. He strode through the ER like he owned it, barking orders, dismissing concerns, treating the nursing staff like servants. He especially seemed to enjoy belittling Sarah. "Nurse Mitchell, did you not hear me calling you?" His voice dripped with condescension. "I need you to clean up room 7. Patient vomited everywhere. It's disgusting." Sarah looked up from the IV she was adjusting for an elderly patient. "Dr. Hoffman, I'm with Mrs. Chen right now. Her potassium is critically low and—" "I didn't ask for your medical opinion," he cut her off. "I asked you to clean a room. You're a nurse. That's your job. Or did you forget?" Heat crept up Sarah's neck, but she kept her voice level. Professional. "I'll get to it as soon as I finish here. Doctor, you'll get to it now." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper that only she could hear. "You know what your problem is, Mitchell? You think you're something special, but you're not. You're just a nurse, a mediocre one at that. So stop acting like you know better than the doctors and do what you're told." Sarah's jaw tightened. Her hands that had assembled and disassembled weapons in pitch-black water, hands that had dragged wounded soldiers to safety, hands that had defused explosives while holding her breath for minutes at a time. Those hands clenched into fists at her sides. But she said nothing. She finished with Mrs. Chen, made sure the woman was stable, and then went to clean room 7. This was her life now. This was what she'd chosen. 3 years ago, Sarah had left the Navy, not because she couldn't handle it, not because she'd failed, but because after 12 years of service, after 6 deployments, after losing too many friends and seeing too much death, she'd needed something different. She'd needed to save lives instead of being ready to take them. She'd needed quiet instead of chaos. She'd needed normal. So she'd gone back to school, gotten her nursing degree, and taken a job at a small hospital in coastal South Carolina, the same town where she'd grown up, where her mother still lived in the same house on Maple Street, where everything was supposed to be simple and safe and peaceful, and it had been, for a while. But peace, Sarah had learned, always came with a price. And sometimes that price was being invisible, being underestimated, being treated like she was less than she was. Most days she could handle it. She reminded herself why she was here. She focused on her patients. She did good work and went home and tried not to think about the woman she used to be, the warrior she used to be. But tonight, something felt different. Maybe it was the way Dr. Hoffman had looked at her, not just with dismissal, but with genuine contempt. Maybe it was the exhaustion of working 60-hour weeks while being treated like she didn't matter. Maybe it was the weight of the pin against her chest, reminding her of everything she'd given up. Or maybe it was what happened 2 hours later. Sarah was restocking supplies in the medroom when she heard raised voices near the nurses' station. She stepped out to see Dr. Hoffman again, this time berating Jenny, a young nurse who'd only been at the hospital for 6 months. Jenny was crying. "I don't care if you were confused by the orders," Hoffman was saying, his voice loud enough for half the ER to hear. "You nearly gave that patient the wrong dosage. Do you understand how close you came to killing someone? Are you really that stupid?" "I'm sorry, Jenny's voice was shaking. "Sorry doesn't cut it. Maybe you're not smart enough for this job." Maybe you should go back to being a receptionist or something more your speed. Sarah felt something snap inside her chest. She'd watched this man bully nurses for months. She'd endured his insults. She'd stayed quiet because she didn't want attention, didn't want to make waves, didn't want anyone looking too closely at who she really was. But watching him reduce this young woman to tears in front of everyone, that was a line too far. Sarah walked straight up to the nurses' station. Her footsteps were quiet but purposeful. When she spoke, her voice was calm, controlled. The same voice she'd used to give orders to her dive team in the middle of combat operations. "Dr. Hoffman." He turned to her, irritation flashing across his face. "What?" "Jenny followed the orders exactly as you wrote them. I saw the chart. You wrote 40 milligrams. She questioned it because the standard dose is 4 milligrams. She came to double-check with you before administering anything. She did exactly what she was supposed to do." The ER got very quiet. Hoffman's face darkened. "Excuse me?" "You made a mistake on the order," Sarah said simply. Jenny caught it. "You should be thanking her, not humiliating her." For a moment, Hoffman just stared at her. Then his expression twisted into something ugly. "How dare you?" he said softly. "How dare you question me in front of the staff? You're a nurse, Mitchell. Just a nurse. You don't get to—" "She's right." The voice came from behind them. Dr. Patricia Chen, the ER director, stood holding a chart. "She must have pulled Jenny's case. You wrote 40 instead of 4, Dr. Chen said, her voice flat. Nurse Rodriguez prevented a serious medication error, and Nurse Mitchell is correct to point that out." Hoffman's face went red. He looked from Dr. Chen to Sarah to Jenny, then back to Sarah. The hatred in his eyes was pure and absolute. "This isn't over," he said quietly to Sarah. Then he turned and walked away. Sarah exhaled slowly. Jenny looked at her with wide, grateful eyes. "Thank you," the young nurse whispered. Sarah managed a small smile. "You did good work. Don't let anyone tell you different." But as she walked back to the med room, Sarah felt the pin against her chest like a weight. She'd made an enemy tonight, and she had no idea just how dangerous that enemy would become. The next 2 weeks were hell. Dr. Hoffman didn't confront Sarah directly. He was too smart for that, too careful. Instead, he did something worse. He started a whisper campaign. It began subtly. A comment here, a suggestion there. Sarah noticed other doctors looking at her differently. Conversations would stop when she entered a room. She'd catch people staring, then quickly looking away. Then the rumors started reaching her ears. "I heard she lied on her resume. Someone said she got fired from her last hospital. Apparently, she thinks she knows more than the doctors. She's difficult. A troublemaker." Sarah kept her head down and did her work. She told herself it didn't matter. She'd faced worse than hospital gossip. She'd survived Hell Week, the most brutal training the military could throw at her. She'd completed dive operations in water so cold it felt like knives cutting into her skin. She'd held her breath underwater while enemies passed overhead. She could survive this. But the isolation wore on her. The other nurses grew distant. Not hostile, exactly. Just careful. Like they were afraid that associating with her might cause them problems too. Only Jenny still talked to her regularly, still sought her advice, still looked at her with gratitude and respect. And then there was Marcus. Marcus Webb was a paramedic who brought patients in from ambulance calls. He was in his mid-30s, former Army, with an easy smile and observant eyes. He'd always been friendly to Sarah, but now he seemed to go out of his way to chat with her. One night, during a rare, quiet moment, he leaned against the nurse's station where Sarah was charting. "You doing okay?" he asked. Sarah didn't look up. "I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look like someone who's got the weight of the world on her shoulders." He paused. "I know what Hoffman's been doing. For what it's worth, most of us think he's full of it." "Most of us isn't all of us," Sarah said quietly. Marcus nodded. "True, but the ones who matter know you're good at your job. Better than good, actually. You've got skills that don't make sense for a regular nurse." Now Sarah did look up. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've seen you handle trauma cases that would make seasoned ER nurses panic, and you're calm as glass. I've watched you assess patients faster and more accurately than doctors with 20 years of experience. You move like someone with tactical training." His eyes were sharp. "You've got a story, Mitchell. A bigger one than you're telling." Sarah's hand moved unconsciously to her chest, where the pin rested beneath her scrubs. I'm just a nurse, she said. Sure you are. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't mocking. It was knowing. Well, if you ever want to talk, I'm around. Army recognizes Army, or Navy, or whatever branch made you into whoever you really are. He walked away before she could respond. Sarah sat there for a long moment, her heart beating faster than it should. She'd been so careful, so quiet. How had he seen through her? But there was no time to worry about it. The radio crackled to life. All units, we have a mass casualty incident. Fishing vessel explosion at the marina. Multiple victims. Burns, blast injuries, possible drownings. All available personnel to the ER. ETA 7 minutes. The hospital erupted into controlled chaos. Sarah moved automatically, helping set up trauma bays, preparing equipment, getting ready for the surge. This was what she was good at. What all her training, both medical and military, had prepared her for. The first ambulance arrived 6 minutes later. Marcus burst through the doors pushing a gurney. The man on it was covered in burns, his clothes charred, his breathing labored. Fisherman, late 50s, caught in the blast, Marcus reported as they rushed him into a bay. Second and third degree burns over 40% of his body. Possible inhalation injury, BP dropping. Sarah was already moving, assessing, starting IV lines, calling out orders to the other nurses. Dr. Chen appeared and took charge, but Sarah was right there with her, anticipating every need, working with precision and speed. 2 more ambulances arrived, then 3 more. The ER became a war zone. Sarah moved through it like she'd been born for this. Her military training kicked in fully. Triage, prioritize, stabilize. Don't think, just move. Save who you can save. She was working on a young woman with severe lacerations when she heard someone shout, "We've got another one coming in." He was trapped underwater, they just pulled him out. No pulse, not breathing. Sarah's head snapped up. Drowning victim. The paramedics wheeled him in. A teenager, maybe 17, his lips blue, his skin gray. Water still dripped from his clothes. How long was he down? Dr. Hoffman demanded. He'd appeared from somewhere taking charge of this case. At least 8 minutes, the paramedic said. Maybe more. The boat wreckage pinned him underwater. Took them forever to get him out. 8 minutes? Hoffman shook his head. Start CPR, but he's hypothermic, Sarah said suddenly, moving closer to look at the boy. She touched his skin, cold, very cold. The water temperature this time of year was maybe 55 degrees. I'm aware of that, Nurse Mitchell, Hoffman said dismissively, but 8 minutes without oxygen means brain death. We'll go through the motions, but no. Sarah's voice cut through sharply. Cold water drowning is different. The mammalian dive reflex can protect the brain. I've seen people survive 15, even 20 minutes underwater in cold water. Hoffman turned to stare at her. You've seen? What exactly have you seen, Nurse Mitchell? What would a nurse possibly know about? Start aggressive warming, Sarah said, ignoring him and looking directly at Dr. Chen. Get him on the warmer blankets, warm IV fluids, humidified oxygen, and we need to keep doing CPR until his core temperature is at least 95 degrees. You're not dead until you're warm and dead. That's actually correct, Dr. Chen said slowly. The protocols for cold water drowning are different. I don't need a nurse telling me protocols. Hoffman snapped. This boy has been without oxygen for... His core temperature is probably around 80 degrees right now, Sarah interrupted. That slows his metabolism to almost nothing. His brain is protected, but we have to warm him slowly and keep up resuscitation efforts. If we give up now, we're killing him. The ER had gone quiet. Everyone was staring at her. Sarah realized she'd stepped way over the line. She'd contradicted a doctor. Again. She'd spoken with authority that nurses weren't supposed to have, but she didn't care, because she'd pulled bodies out of cold water before. She'd seen the miracle of cold water survival. She'd done underwater rescue and recovery as part of her dive team operations. She knew things that most nurses, most doctors, would never know. Hoffman's face was purple with rage. You are out of line, Nurse Mitchell. She's right. Everyone turned. Dr. Patricia Chen stepped forward, pulling up something on her tablet. The American Heart Association guidelines for hypothermic cardiac arrest support exactly what Nurse Mitchell just said. We continue resuscitation efforts until the patient is rewarmed. We don't call it until core temperature reaches at least 95 degrees. She looked at Hoffman. Nurse Mitchell's protocol is correct. Hoffman looked like he might explode, But Dr. Chen had already taken over, calling out orders that matched exactly what Sarah had recommended. They worked for 40 minutes. Warm blankets, warm fluids, humidified oxygen heated to body temperature, and constant unrelenting CPR. Sarah took her turn on compressions, her arms burning, her whole body focused on keeping this boy's blood moving until his heart decided to start again. And then, at minute 37 it happened, a beep on the monitor, then another, then a rhythm. "We've got a pulse." Someone shouted. The boy gasped, water erupting from his mouth. They turned him quickly, clearing his airway. His chest began to rise and fall on its own. The ER erupted in cheers. Sarah stepped back, her scrub soaked with sweat and water, her hands shaking from exertion. Dr. Chen caught her eye and nodded. A small gesture of respect, but Hoffman was staring at her with pure hatred. And something else. Suspicion. As the chaos settled and the boy was rushed to ICU, Hoffman cornered Sarah near the supply room. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. "I'm a nurse." "No. No regular nurse knows what you know. No regular nurse moves the way you move. No regular nurse has the confidence to override a doctor's judgment in the middle of a crisis." He stepped closer. "So I'm going to ask you again. Who are you? What are you hiding?" Sarah met his eyes. "I'm not hiding anything. You're lying." His smile was cold. "But that's okay. Because I'm going to find out. I'm going to dig into every part of your past until I know exactly what you're trying to keep secret. And when I find it, I'm going to bury you with it." He walked away, leaving Sarah standing alone in the hallway. Her hand moved to the pin beneath her scrubs. The secret she'd kept so carefully, the life she'd left behind. It was all about to come crashing back. Dr. Hoffman kept his word. Over the next week, Sarah felt the investigation closing in around her like a net. She'd catch him watching her from across the ER. She'd see him talking quietly with hospital administration. Once, she walked past an office and heard her name mentioned, followed by the words background check and inconsistencies. Her stomach twisted with dread. There was nothing illegal in her past, nothing shameful. But there were things that were classified, operations she couldn't talk about. Missions that officially never happened. Years of her life that existed only in redacted files and sealed records. And if Hoffman dug deep enough, if he asked the right questions, if he pushed hard enough, her quiet life would be over. Sarah lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling of her small apartment, wondering if she should just quit, walk away, find another hospital in another town where no one would ask questions. But that felt like retreat. And Sarah Mitchell didn't retreat. She'd earned that combat diver pin. She'd earned her place in rooms where men said women didn't belong. She'd earned every scar, every achievement, every moment of respect she'd fought for in the Navy. She wasn't going to run from a bully with a medical degree, but she also wasn't sure how to fight this particular battle. The answer came on a Tuesday morning, in the form of a phone call. Sarah was at home, trying to sleep after a brutal night shift, when her phone rang. She grabbed it without looking at the caller ID. "Hello? Is this Sarah Mitchell?" A man's voice. Professional. Clipped. Sarah sat up, suddenly alert. "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Commander James Pritchard. I'm with Naval Special Warfare Command. I need to speak with you about a situation that's developed. Can you meet me today?" Sarah's heart began to pound. "What kind of situation?" "Not something I can discuss over the phone. I'm in Charleston. I can be at your location in an hour." 45 minutes later, Sarah sat in a coffee shop across from a man in civilian clothes who had Navy written all over him. Commander Pritchard was in his 50s, gray at the temples, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of hard service. He slid a folder across the table. "You've been keeping a low profile, Petty Officer Mitchell." Sarah flinched at the rank she hadn't heard in 3 years. "I'm retired, sir." "I'm aware. And I'm also aware that someone's been digging into your service record." Dr. Bradley Hoffman filed multiple requests through Freedom of Information Act, trying to access your military files. Sarah's blood ran cold. "Can he do that?" "He can try. Most of your record is sealed due to the classified nature of your work. But he's persistent. He's also filed a complaint with your hospital's board, suggesting you've misrepresented your qualifications and experience. Pritchard's expression was neutral. Thought you should know what you're dealing with. Thank you, sir. Sarah's mind was racing. Is that why you're here? Partly. Pritchard leaned back. But there's another reason. We have a situation developing off the coast. A civilian research vessel has gotten into trouble near some old Navy wrecks. There are divers trapped underwater in a collapsed structure. The Coast Guard is coordinating rescue efforts, but... He paused. The dive conditions are extreme. Deep, cold water, limited visibility, complicated wreckage. They need divers with technical and combat diving experience. Sarah's throat went dry. Sir, I've been out for 3 years. I know. But you were one of the best. Your record speaks for itself. His eyes were steady. I'm not ordering you to do anything. You're a civilian now. But the Coast Guard asked me to reach out to any retired combat divers in the area who might be able to assist. Your name came up. How many divers are trapped? 3. They've been down for 2 hours, running out of air. The civilian rescue divers can't reach them. The passage is too narrow, too unstable. They need someone smaller, someone with advanced training, someone like her. Sarah closed her eyes. She'd left this life behind. She'd walked away from the danger, the missions, the constant edge of violence and death. She'd chosen peace, chosen normal. But 3 people were dying. When? She asked quietly. Now. We have a helicopter waiting. Sarah thought about her shift at the hospital tonight. Thought about Dr. Hoffman and his investigation. Thought about the quiet life she'd built. Then she thought about 3 people trapped in darkness underwater, their air running out, their hope fading. I need to make a phone call, she said. 30 minutes later, Sarah was in the air. She'd called the hospital and told them she had a family emergency. It wasn't exactly a lie. The Navy had been her family for 12 years. And this was definitely an emergency. Now she sat in a Coast Guard helicopter, wearing a flight suit they'd provided, her hair pulled back, her mind shifting into a mode she hadn't accessed in 3 years. Combat diver mode. The chatter on the radio painted a grim picture. The research vessel had been exploring a World War II wreck site when part of the structure collapsed. 3 divers were trapped inside, pinned by debris in a compartment that was slowly flooding. The entrance was partially blocked. The currents were strong and unpredictable. Every civilian rescue attempt had failed. When the helicopter landed on the Coast Guard cutter, Sarah was met by a team of divers who looked at her with open skepticism. She was used to that look. You're the Navy combat diver? One of them asked. He was huge, 6'4", broad as a house. His name tag read Morrison. Yes. You're a woman? Yes. No offense, ma'am, but this dive is... I know what it is, Sarah said calmly. I've done worse. Deeper, colder, more complicated. If you've got the briefing materials, I'd like to see them. Morrison exchanged glances with his team, then shrugged and led her to a planning area. Sarah studied the wreck diagrams, the depth readings, the current patterns. Her mind clicked through the problem like she'd never stopped doing this work. The main entrance is blocked here, she said, pointing. But there should be a secondary access point through this passage. It's narrow, maybe 18 inches wide, but it should lead to the compartment where they're trapped. We know about that passage, Morrison said. It's too small. We can't get through with standard gear. I can. Sarah looked up at him. Reduced gear configuration. Smaller tank, minimal equipment. I've done similar penetration dives before. In training, maybe. In Somalia, Sarah said quietly. Recovering classified equipment from a downed aircraft that crashed into a river, and in the Philippines, and off the coast of Yemen. Sir, I appreciate your concern, but I know what I'm doing. The Coast Guard divers stared at her. Morrison's expression slowly changed from skepticism to respect. Okay then, he said. Let's gear you up. 20 minutes later, Sarah stood at the edge of the boat in a wetsuit, tank secured, mask ready. The water below was dark and choppy. The sun was setting, which meant they were running out of time. She checked her equipment one last time. Everything felt familiar. Right. Like coming home. She'd forgotten how much she'd missed this. The fear. The focus. The absolute clarity that came from knowing your life depended on your training and your skills. "You've got 40 minutes of air," Morrison said. "That's it. If you can't reach them in 20, you abort and come back up. Understood?" "Understood. There's a guideline running down to the wreck. Follow it to the main structure, then navigate to the secondary passage. We'll be on the radio, but communication will be limited once you're inside." Sarah nodded. She pulled her mask down, and then she stepped off the boat and into the water. The cold hit her like a fist. 50-degree water, dark as ink. But Sarah didn't panic. She'd trained in worse. She followed the guideline down, 20 feet, 40 feet, 60 feet. The wreck emerged from the gloom like a ghost ship. Twisted metal, broken structures, decades of rust and decay. Sarah navigated carefully, her breathing steady and controlled. Every breath mattered. Every movement had to be precise. She found the secondary passage Morrison had mentioned. He was right. It was tight. Very tight. Sarah removed her tank, holding it in front of her, and squeezed into the narrow opening. Metal scraped against her wetsuit. The passage was barely wide enough for her shoulders. She pulled herself forward with her hands, pushing the tank ahead of her, moving inch by inch through absolute darkness. This was what she'd trained for. This was what separated combat divers from everyone else. The willingness to push into spaces that terrified normal people, to stay calm when everything screamed at you to panic, to trust your training even when your instincts said run. The passage opened up. Sarah pulled herself through and into a larger compartment and saw them, 3 figures in diving gear, huddled in a corner. One of them saw her light and grabbed the others. Sarah checked her gauge. She'd been down for 18 minutes. She had 22 minutes to get all 4 of them out alive. The hard part was just beginning. Sarah moved quickly to the trapped divers. The first one she reached was a woman in her 30s, eyes wide with fear behind her mask. Sarah checked her air gauge. Almost empty. Maybe 5 minutes left. The second diver was a younger man, early 20s. His breathing was too fast, panic breathing, burning through air he didn't have. His gauge showed even less. The third was older, maybe 50, and his leg was pinned under a piece of metal debris. He was the calmest of the 3, but Sarah could see pain in his eyes. She had to make a decision. Fast. Sarah signaled to the woman and the young man, "Follow me." Then she turned to the older diver and examined the metal pinning his leg. Heavy, but she thought she could shift it. She signaled, "Wait, I'll come back." He nodded, understanding, trusting her. Sarah guided the first 2 divers back to the narrow passage. The woman went first, Sarah feeding her the tank, talking her through it with hand signals. Slow, steady, don't panic. The woman made it through. The young man was next. But he was panicking now, his movements jerky. Sarah grabbed his shoulders, forced him to look at her. She made the universal sign, slow down, breathe. His eyes locked on hers, and something in her gaze, the absolute calm, the complete confidence, cut through his panic. He nodded. Sarah guided him into the passage. Watched him squeeze through, waited until his fins disappeared, then she turned back. The older diver was watching her. His air gauge was in the red. Sarah swam to him and examined the metal debris more carefully. It was part of the ship's structure, bent and twisted. She braced her feet against the bulkhead and pulled. Nothing. She pulled harder. Her muscles burned. The metal groaned but didn't move. Sarah checked her own air. 15 minutes left. She repositioned, found better leverage, and pulled again with everything she had. Years of training. Years of physical conditioning that she'd maintained even after leaving the Navy. Every morning run. Every weight session. Every moment of discipline, it all came down to this. The metal shifted. Inch by inch, Sarah moved it. Her lungs screamed for air. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision, and then suddenly the debris tilted away. The diver pulled his leg free. Sarah checked it quickly. Not broken, but badly bruised. He could swim. She signaled. "We go now." But when they reached the narrow passage, Sarah realized the problem. The diver was bigger than the other two, broader shoulders, and his injured leg meant he couldn't maneuver as well. He tried to enter the passage, got stuck, tried again, couldn't make it through. Sarah checked her air. 10 minutes, not enough to go back and find another route, not enough to wait for help. There was only one option. Sarah removed her tank completely, took 3 deep breaths, hyperventilating to saturate her blood with oxygen. Then she took one final massive breath and removed her regulator. The diver's eyes went wide with shock. But Sarah was already moving. She squeezed into the passage beside him, using her body as a lever, pushing him, guiding him, forcing the angle that would let him through. Her lungs began to burn. 30 seconds without air. She pushed harder. The diver was moving now, squeezing through. 45 seconds. The diver was almost through. Sarah's vision started to darken. Her body screamed for air. 60 seconds. The diver cleared the passage. Sarah's lungs were on fire. Every instinct told her to breathe, to open her mouth, to give in. But she'd held her breath for longer than this. In training, in combat, she'd done 2 minutes before. She could do this. Sarah pulled herself through the passage, grabbed her tank on the other side, and slammed the regulator back in her mouth. Air flooded her lungs. She'd never tasted anything so sweet. The diver was staring at her with absolute awe. Sarah checked her gauge. 5 minutes of air left. She grabbed the diver and they swam for the surface. They emerged into twilight. The Coast Guard cutter's lights blazed across the water. Hands reached down to pull them aboard. Sarah broke the surface, pulled off her mask, and sucked in huge breaths of air. Morrison was there, pulling her onto the boat. "The other two?" she gasped. "Safe, already aboard. You got all 3. His face was split in a huge grin. "You actually got all 3. Sarah collapsed onto the deck, her whole body shaking from cold and exhaustion. She'd done it. 3 people who would have died were alive because of her. This was what she'd trained for. This was what all the pain and sacrifice and struggle had been for. Not to be invisible in a hospital, not to hide who she was, but to save lives when no one else could. The story should have ended there. But life, Sarah had learned, was rarely that simple. She returned to St. Augustine 2 days later. The Coast Guard had wanted her to stay for debriefing, for medical checks, for the inevitable paperwork. Commander Pritchard had personally thanked her. Morrison and his team had insisted on buying her dinner, treating her like the hero she was. It had felt good. But she'd come back to her real life. To the hospital. To her job. To Dr. Hoffman and his investigation. Sarah walked into St. Augustine General on Thursday evening for her scheduled shift. Still sore from the dive, still tired but ready to work. The atmosphere in the ER was strange. People were staring at her, whispering. Jenny rushed up to her, eyes wide. "Sarah, have you seen the news?" "What news?" Jenny pulled out her phone and showed her. It was a local news broadcast. The headline read, "Local nurse revealed as decorated Navy combat diver in dramatic rescue." Sarah's stomach dropped. The story detailed the rescue, showed footage of the Coast Guard cutter, interviewed Morrison, who praised the incredible skill and bravery of former Navy Petty Officer Sarah Mitchell, one of the few women ever to earn the combat diver qualification. Her secret was out. Everything she'd kept hidden, everything she'd tried to leave behind, exposed. "Sarah, why didn't you tell us?" Jenny asked. "You're a hero!" But Sarah barely heard her, because across the ER she saw Dr. Hoffman, and the look on his face was pure fury. He stormed over to her. "My office. Now." Sarah followed him into a small consultation room. He slammed the door. "You lied to me," he said. "You lied to everyone. You've been walking around here pretending to be just a nurse when you're some kind of... I never lied," Sarah said quietly. "I am a nurse. That's what I do now. You made me look like a fool. Do you know how many people are talking about how I tried to give up on that drowning victim? How I didn't know the cold water protocols? How you corrected me?" His face was red. "And now I find out you have all this special training, this military background, and you never disclosed it?" "I disclosed everything required on my application," Sarah said. "My nursing credentials are legitimate. My experience is real." I didn't hide anything that mattered for this job. Everything matters. You should have told us. Why? Sarah's voice was sharp now. So you could treat me differently? So everyone could either put me on a pedestal or resent me for my background? I wanted to be judged on my nursing skills. Just my nursing skills. That's why I didn't advertise my military service. You don't get to make that choice. You don't get to... The door opened. Dr. Patricia Chen stood there along with two people Sarah didn't recognize. One was a woman in a business suit. The other was a man in a Navy uniform, captain's insignia. Dr. Hoffman, that's enough, Dr. Chen said. These people need to speak with Nurse Mitchell. Hoffman looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Dr. Chen's expression stopped him. He left, radiating anger. Dr. Chen smiled at Sarah. Nurse Mitchell, this is Amanda Foster from our hospital board, and Captain David Reynolds from Naval Public Affairs. Sarah's heart sank. This was it. Whatever came next would change everything. Nurse Mitchell, Amanda Foster said, we've become aware of your military background and your recent actions in the rescue operation. We wanted to speak with you about... I understand if you need to let me go, Sarah interrupted. I should have been more upfront about let you go? Foster looked confused. Ms. Mitchell, we want to offer you a position heading our new emergency response training program. Your unique combination of combat medicine and nursing experience makes you perfectly qualified to train our staff in mass casualty situations, trauma response, and crisis management. Sarah blinked. What? It would be a significant promotion, Foster continued. Better pay, better hours, and you'd still work clinical shifts in the ER. But you'd also be developing training protocols and teaching. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. And the Navy would like to contract your services as well. We're developing new dive medicine protocols, and we need consultants with both combat diving and medical experience. It would be part-time, flexible around your hospital schedule. Sarah couldn't speak, couldn't process what she was hearing. We don't need an answer right now, Dr. Chen said gently. Take some time to think about it. But Sarah, you don't have to hide anymore. We see you, all of you, and we value what you bring to this hospital. The meeting ended. Sarah walked out into the ER in a daze. The staff was gathering near the nurses' station. When they saw her, they started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder. Jenny was crying and smiling at the same time. Marcus was grinning. Even some of the doctors who'd been distant were applauding. Sarah stood there overwhelmed, as the people she worked with celebrated her, not for hiding, not for being invisible, but for being exactly who she was. That night, after her shift, Sarah sat in her car in the parking lot. She pulled the chain from beneath her scrubs and looked at the combat diver pin. The small piece of gold that represented years of her life, years of sacrifice and struggle and achievement. She'd kept it hidden for so long, but maybe, she thought, it was time to let it see the light. Sarah unclasped the chain and pinned the combat diver pin to her scrub top. Right over her heart, where it belonged, where everyone could see it. The next morning, Sarah walked into the hospital wearing her pin proudly. Dr. Hoffman saw it. His face darkened, but he said nothing, because what could he say? She'd beaten him, not by hiding, not by fighting, but by being undeniably excellent at everything she did. Sarah Mitchell was a combat diver, and she was a nurse, both things. Fully. Completely. She didn't have to choose. She didn't have to hide. She could be all of herself, in all her complexity and strength. And that, she realized, was the real victory. Not saving 3 divers from a wreck, not proving Dr. Hoffman wrong, but learning that she didn't have to be small to be safe. That her strength wasn't something to apologize for. That the woman who'd earned that pin and the woman who cared for patients with gentle hands were the same person, and she was enough, more than enough. She was exactly who she was meant to be.